In the middle of a golden desert, where the wind whispered through the dunes, a lonely cowboy rode silently, his hat low, his eyes empty, and his heart carrying the weight of 1,000 lost dreams. His name was Jack Hunter. A man who once believed in love, but life had taken everything away from him. Now, he had nothing left but his horse, and the endless road ahead. Sound of wind increasing. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in orange and gold, Jack suddenly heard a faint cry, a voice filled with pain and fear. He stopped his horse, listening closely. There it was again, a woman's voice. Jack kicked his boots, galloped toward the sound. And behind a sand dune, he saw her. A young Apache woman, lying in the sand, her leg twisted, her horse fallen beside her. Soft background strings, emotional tone. He jumped down from his horse and rushed to her side. Her face was pale, her breathing heavy. She looked up at him with frightened, beautiful eyes. "Jack," softly. "Easy now, you're hurt. Don't be afraid, I won't harm you." Woman, weak voice. "My horse slipped. I can't move my leg." Jack tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and wrapped her wound gently. His hands were rough, but his touch was careful, almost tender. "Jack. I'll take you somewhere safe. Can you hold on?" She nodded silently, tears mixing with the desert dust on her face. Sound of horse galloping, fade into campfire crackling. That night, under a blanket of stars, Jack built a small fire near his camp. The woman lay quietly, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Her name was Ayanna. An Apache spirit, brave, proud, and wounded by fate. For a long time, they said nothing. Only the crackling fire spoke between them. Finally, Ayanna whispered, "You travel alone. Why?" Jack looked at the fire, his voice low. "Because love betrayed me. I lost her, and I lost myself." Ayanna looked at him gently. "Maybe love never betrayed you. Maybe destiny just changed the path." Soft music, hope rising. The days that followed were quiet yet full of meaning. Jack cared for her, helped her walk again. And in return, Ayanna brought life back to his lonely soul. They shared stories of pain and laughter. Rode together through the desert winds. And in those silent moments, they found peace. A connection beyond words. Soft instrumental, slow build. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ayanna finally stood without pain. Jack smiled, but behind that smile was something heavy, the fear of goodbye. "Jack," softly. "So, you'll be leaving soon?" Ayanna nodded. "Yes, but remember this, cowboy. Some people meet only once. But that one meeting can change their lives forever." She looked into his eyes, smiled sadly, and turned toward the vast desert. Jack stood still, watching her walk away. The wind blowing her hair. The fire dying slowly behind him. The sun hung low, a blood-red disk bleeding into the horizon, casting long shadows across the cracked, thirsty earth of the Arizona desert. Silas Kane, a cowboy with a face carved by wind and regret, urged his horse, Dusty, forward. His hat, weathered as his soul, tipped low to shield his eyes from the glare. Silas was no stranger to solitude, it was his oldest companion, stitched into the seams of his life like the worn leather of his saddle. For years, he drifted from town to town, a ghost in boots, carrying nothing but a rusted harmonica and a heart heavy with unspoken stories. Tonight, though, the desert felt different, alive with a whisper he couldn't quite hear, as if fate itself was stirring the sand. Silas was 38, though his gray-streaked beard and the lines etched around his hazel eyes made him look older. He'd once had a family, a wife named Clara and a daughter, Lily, with laughter like a meadowlark's song. They were gone now, taken by a fever that swept through their homestead 5 years ago. The loss had hollowed him out, leaving a man who rode not toward anything but away from everything. He didn't pray anymore, the sky felt too empty for that. But as Dusty's hooves crunched against the parched ground, Silas felt an itch in his chest, a pull he couldn't name. He scanned the endless expanse, expecting nothing but cacti and silence. Then he saw her. She lay crumpled near a cluster of saguaro, her body half hidden by a dune. At first, Silas thought she was a mirage, a trick of the heat. But as he drew closer, he saw the rise and fall of her chest, faint but real. Dismounting, he approached cautiously, his spurs jingling softly. She was an Apache woman, her dark hair spilling like ink across the sand, her face streaked with dust and blood. Her traditional deerskin dress was torn, and a gash on her leg oozed red into the earth. Her eyes, closed, fluttered as if caught in a dream she couldn't escape. Silas knelt beside her, his calloused hand hovering over her shoulder. "Ma'am," he whispered, voice rough as gravel. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes snapped open, wide with fear, and she scrambled back, clutching a small knife that glinted in the fading light. "Stay away," she rasped, her voice cracked but fierce. Silas raised his hands, palms out, his heart thudding. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said. "You're hurt bad. Let me help." Her gaze darted over him, weighing his words against the weight of her pain. Slowly, the knife lowered, and she slumped back, exhaustion overtaking her defiance. Silas worked quickly, tearing a strip from his own shirt to bandage her leg. He offered her water from his canteen, and she drank greedily, her hands trembling. Her name was Ayanna, she told him, her voice soft but steady now. She was 28, a healer from her tribe, sent to gather rare herbs in the desert. Bandits had ambushed her, stealing her horse and supplies, leaving her to die. "I thought the desert would take me," she said, her eyes distant. "Maybe it still will." Silas shook his head. "Not tonight," he said firmly. "Not if I gotta say." He helped her onto Dusty, ignoring the ache in his own tired bones. The nearest town, Redstone, was a day's ride, and night was falling fast. He'd have to keep her alive until then. As they rode, Ayanna's head rested against his back, her breathing shallow but steady. Silas felt the weight of her trust, fragile as a bird's wing. He hadn't saved anyone in years, not since he'd failed Clara and Lily. The memory stung, but he pushed it down, focusing on the path ahead. The desert was no forgiving place, it took without asking, and Silas knew its cruelty too well. Yet here he was, a man who'd given up on redemption, carrying a stranger toward salvation. The stars began to prick the sky, and Silas wondered if the whisper he'd felt earlier was the desert, or something greater, guiding him to this moment. They stopped at a small cave to rest, the air cool against the desert's lingering heat. Silas built a fire, its crackle filling the silence. Ayanna watched him, her dark eyes reflecting the flames. "Why do you help me?" she asked, her voice cutting through the quiet. Silas poked at the fire, avoiding her gaze. "Ain't right to leave someone to die," he muttered. But her question lingered, heavy as the smoke between them. He didn't have an answer, not one he could put into words. Maybe it was the way her courage mirrored Clara's, or the way her vulnerability reminded him of Lily. Or maybe it was simpler, in a world that had taken so much, saving her felt like defying the odds. The night stretched on, and Ayanna shared stories of her people, tales of the stars as ancestors, of the desert as both mother and judge. Silas listened, his harmonica forgotten in his pocket. Her words painted pictures he hadn't seen in years, a world alive with meaning, not just survival. He told her about his ranch, long abandoned, and the way Lily used to chase fireflies. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and Ayanna's silence was kind, not pitying. For the first time in years, Silas felt seen, not as a drifter, but as a man. Dawn broke, painting the desert gold. Ayanna's fever had worsened, her skin hot to the touch. Silas's heart sank, Redstone was still hours away, and Dusty was tiring. He gave her the last of his water, ignoring his own parched throat. As they rode, Ayana murmured, "You carry too much pain, cowboy. Let it go." Her words hit like a bullet, sharp and true. Silas didn't respond, but her voice echoed in his mind, stirring memories he'd buried. He'd spent years running from his grief, but here, with Ayana's life in his hands, he couldn't run anymore. Midday brought an unexpected turn. Hoofbeats thundered behind them, and Silas's hand went to his revolver. 3 men appeared, their faces masked by bandanas, the bandits who'd attacked Ayana. They'd tracked her, likely for the herbs she carried, rare and valuable. Silas's blood ran cold, but he stood his ground, shielding Ayana. "Leave her be," he growled, his voice steady despite the odds. The leader laughed, raising his gun. "You're a fool, old man." Silas didn't flinch. He'd faced death before, it didn't scare him. What scared him was failing again. The standoff was quick and brutal. Silas's aim was true, felling one bandit before the others charged. A bullet grazed his shoulder, but he fought on, driven by a fire he hadn't felt in years. Ayana, weak but defiant, threw a rock, distracting the leader long enough for Silas to tackle him. When the dust settled, 2 bandits were dead, and the third had fled. Silas staggered, blood seeping through his shirt, but he checked on Ayana first. She was pale but alive, her eyes wide with awe. "You fought for me," she whispered. Silas shrugged, wincing. "Had to." They reached Redstone by dusk, Silas half-conscious from blood loss. The town's doctor took Ayana, promising she'd recover. Silas refused treatment until he knew she was safe, collapsing only when the doctor nodded. As he drifted into darkness, Ayana's voice echoed, "Let it go." He didn't know if he could, but for the first time, he wanted to try. Silas woke in a narrow bed, the scent of antiseptic sharp in his nose. His shoulder throbbed, bandaged tightly, but he was alive. The doctor, a gruff man named Harris, told him Ayana was recovering in the next room. "She's asking for you," Harris said, his tone softer than his weathered face. Silas nodded, his chest tight with something he couldn't name. He'd saved her, but the weight of her words, "Let it go," still clung to him, heavy as the desert dust on his boots. He found Ayana sitting up, her leg wrapped in clean bandages, her dark eyes brighter than before. She smiled, a small curve that warmed the room. "You look terrible, cowboy," she teased, her voice stronger now. Silas chuckled, a rusty sound. "Feel worse," he admitted, easing into a chair beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need filling. Then Ayana reached for his hand, her fingers cool against his calloused palm. "You gave me a second chance," she said. "Why?" Silas looked at their joined hands, his throat tight. "Didn't have a choice," he said. "Something about you felt like I was supposed to find you." Ayana's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand. "My people believe the desert brings people together for a reason," she said. "Maybe it wasn't just me you saved." Her words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through him. He wanted to argue, to say he was just a drifter doing what was right, but the truth in her gaze stopped him. Over the next few days, Silas stayed in Redstone, helping Ayana as she regained her strength. The town, small but lively, buzzed with stories of the cowboy who'd fought off bandits for an Apache woman. Silas hated the attention, but Ayana's quiet gratitude made it bearable. She taught him about her tribe's healing herbs, her hands steady as she crushed leaves into poultices. He told her about the stars he'd watched with Lily, pointing out constellations through the boarding house window. Each conversation chipped away at the walls he'd built, and Silas felt something stir, a flicker of hope he'd thought long dead. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ayana turned to him. "Come with me," she said. "To my village. My people could use a man like you, someone who fights for what's right." Silas froze, the offer catching him off guard. He'd never stayed anywhere long, not since Clara and Lily. The idea of belonging again terrified him, but so did the thought of riding away. "I ain't much for settlin' down," he said, his voice low. Ayana's gaze didn't waver. "You're not as lost as you think, Silas Kane." That night, he dreamed of Clara and Lily, but not of their deaths. They were laughing, running through a field, waving him forward. When he woke, tears stung his eyes, but they weren't bitter. For the first time, he felt the weight of his grief shift, not gone but lighter, like a stone he could carry instead of one that crushed him. Ayana's words echoed, "Maybe it wasn't just me you saved." He realized she was right. Saving her had forced him to face himself, to see the man he could still be. The emotional climax came the next morning. Ayana's brother, Tarak, arrived in Redstone with a group of Apache warriors to escort her home. They thanked Silas with gifts of woven blankets and a carved wooden horse, symbols of their gratitude. Tarak clasped Silas's arm, his grip firm. "You honored my sister's life," he said. "You have a place with us, always." Silas looked at Ayana, her eyes bright with hope, and felt his heart crack open. He'd spent years believing he deserved nothing but loneliness, but here was a chance to start again, not to forget his past, but to build on it. He made his choice. "I'll come," he told Ayana, his voice steady. "But only if you'll teach me more of them stories about the stars." She laughed, a sound like clear water, and nodded. As they rode toward her village, Silas on Dusty and Ayana on a borrowed mare, the desert stretched before them, vast and unyielding. But it no longer felt empty. The whisper he'd heard that first night was louder now, a song of second chances and unexpected bonds. In the months that followed, Silas found a home among Ayana's people. He learned their ways, helped tend their horses, and shared his own skills, teaching the children how to whittle. Ayana became his anchor, her strength and kindness a mirror to the man he was becoming. They never spoke of love in words, too many scars between them for that, but it grew in the quiet moments, in the way she touched his arm or he played his harmonica for her under the stars. The desert, once his judge, became his sanctuary. Silas Kane, the lonely cowboy, had saved Ayana, but she had saved him too. Destiny had brought them together, not to erase their pain but to show them they could carry it together. And as the desert bloomed with spring, so did their hope, a reminder that even in the harshest places, kindness can spark a new beginning.